How important is this, the rock art that's here?
Oh, it's a difficult question. Difficult question to answer. It's you have to have a perception of the Aboriginal value system and the significance that this has to them in order to really appreciate it. Now, I can talk to you about it in purely archaeological terms, and I could present a very convincing case leaving Aboriginal people out of it, and just simply talk about it as a white fellow archaeologist in terms of world heritage and how this compares with other places. And I have been very lucky in that I have worked in a number of countries, and I have studied and visited numbers of sites throughout Africa, in the USA, in Europe, in India, and in Australia. And I wouldn't like to say from the point of view of I'm not into making comparisons from quality and what's better than what, but from the point of view of sheer density of evidence and variety of evidence, this area here stands very high on the list of world rating. I mean, if this was in another country, it would be a top tourist destination. And there would be interpretative centres and guided tours, and I mean, it's just astounding to come to a valley like this, using this as an example. And there are hundreds of them throughout the Burrup and associated archipelago. And to think that there's just, and it adds to its charm, of course.
Would you like to see those things, an interpretive centre here built?
Well, I think it's got to come. I think it has to come eventually. I'm very pleased indeed that I had the opportunity to be here before all of that started. But the thing is that if you're going to look after things, they have to be managed. And as places become better known, I mean, it hurts me enormously, for instance, to see the areas where we turn the vehicles, park the vehicles on a campsite. I mean, this should never have happened. It shouldn't have been allowed to happen. It hurts me to see tracks all over the place. Wherever a four-wheel drive can go, there's a track. None of this was planned. None of it is monitored. Nobody looks to see what's happening to the area. Now, most people are responsible and appreciate what they're looking at, but all you need is one kid to come up and scribble his name or scratch his name, and you're wrecking the evidence. So from an archaeological perspective alone, it's very, very high on the world scale of value. From an Aboriginal point of view is another story. Sorry,
how old would the stuff be?
That's $1 million question, because no techniques have really been evolved yet that date engravings accurately, because the whole thing is that you're taking evidence away. In other words, to make an engraving or a petroglyph, you're taking the rock away, and that rock doesn't exist any longer. It's somewhere, but you can't date something that isn't there. Whereas if you've got a painting, you're actually adding another medium onto the rock surface, and that has a possibility of being dated. But you're looking at a negative here, and it's very difficult. But some engravings were dated on the Dampier salt leases, where shell had accumulated, where they'd been sitting eating shell, like this midden here, but it had accumulated in a deep pile and covered some engravings. Now you can date shell, and the level of the shells that were covering the engravings were dated to 2,800 years. So we know the engravings were already there
thousands of years old
before 2,800, and those particular engravings actually look very recent. There are a lot of other engravings that visually look a great deal older than that,
right.
But we don't have this freak circumstance of them being covered with a medium that you can date.
Okay, what's your feeling about the types of things, and what types of things are pictured in the engravings here?
There's a huge variety. We've just walked up the valley, and truly, when you get your eye in, virtually every rock has got something on it. And from the Aboriginal perspective, each of those engravings tells a story, or is part of an integrated story. And not only of this area here, this site here, or these rock piles here, but these images relate to other areas. So there was a lovely example up there of emu, and they were all facing towards the centre of the Burrup. Now I happen to know that in the centre of the Burrup there's some other large engravings of emu. And probably, I mean, we don't know this, we've lost this information, but the way the Aboriginal value system works is that these emu came as ancestral figures, and they camped here. They used the water holes here, they camped here, they used the grinding surfaces, that's where they ground their flour, it's where they collected the shells. In other words, the pattern was established by the ancestral figures, and this is a pattern that today's Aboriginal people continue. It set the template for their behaviour. And so the story would be that these ancestral emu, which are associated with initiation, which are totemic figures and so on, they would have come from over there and then followed a route, and they're probably emu footprints. You could, if you knew where to look, you would. I'm only just using this as a hypothetical example. You would find emu footprints following through, just the odd imprint, facing in this direction, coming to those rocks there where you've got the emu family, the big emu and the little emu, and then they'd have gone on, there would be a story associated with how they camped and used the water, etc. And then they would have moved on to the centre of the Burrup, and there they camped again, and so there you have the images again. In other words, the Aboriginal people are connecting up a whole series of places, and the stories are all interlinked, and they're all meaningful to the present. In other words, it's the past being brought right into the present. And it's a very different concept from us coming and looking at it like a museum piece and asking how old is it. I mean, that to a traditional Aboriginal person would be anathema. As far as they're concerned, it's been here forever. Yeah. And any question of anything that questions that is questioning the beginning of the world. Yeah. It's questioning creation. They just accept that this was a pattern that was put here and that they follow.